Nelson. I'm Executive Director of the Fair Housing Center of Central Indiana. Thank you so much for being here tonight and for inviting us in. Happy to kind of have just free-wielding discussion. I'll start out by just explaining a little bit about who the Fair Housing Center is, talk about our programs a little bit, maybe talk some recent actions or activities, but otherwise kind of open it up to you. I do have some things that I can share on my screen on our public policy, looking at the next session, a report that we just released today on foreclosures, as well as to talk about briefly, if I can, two recent court actions that we filed on class actions as well. So we'll just kind of see where the questions kind of go. So starting off first is the Fair Housing Center. We are a nonprofit organization, essentially to facilitate open housing for all people. And so we fight issues such as housing discrimination. We also work on expansion of affordable housing, promotion of diverse and inclusive neighborhoods. We work on systemic based issues, and we also work on public policy type issues as well. So we do that. Let me start. We're based here in Indianapolis. We have a staff of 9, and we're currently the only such organization in the state of Indiana, which is somewhat unique. Many the states around us, basically every metro area, has a fair housing organization. Ohio has 9 groups, for instance. Michigan has 6. Illinois has 8. But we are it here in Indiana. And technically, our name is Central Indiana, but we do sometimes go outside Central Indiana when we have the resources, the staff time to be able to do that. But we can't do it all the time. 9 people just can't cover a state of 6.5 million people. So, but to facilitate our mission, we have 4 main programs. The first is our counseling program, which is that particular program is where we're working one on one with individuals. We provide housing counseling, referrals. We connect people with resources, housing options, help people who might be worried about eviction or foreclosure, instability. We help people identify available housing programs. And then we also try to combat or address inequities that individuals may have with their housing providers or with housing based services. And we have our education program, which is where we try to expand information about fair housing knowledge to housing consumers, housing providers, housing related services, to try to address any barriers or challenges to housing equity and opportunity within that. Then we have our third program is our Inclusive Communities program. This is where we try to engage in neighborhood stabilization and community investment work. We try to combat systemic factors that impact housing choice. We advocate for good, fair housing planning. We also try to bring awareness to market forces that might be impacting housing consumers. And I might talk about some of our reports after this. And then we offer activities and programs to help people who might be impacted by inequities, disinvestment, or unequal housing opportunity. And then our last program is our public policy program. And that's where we work to try to enact laws that will promote access to housing. We try to increase the awareness of policymakers and regulators about issues dealing with disparities and inequities in housing. We try to work with local, state, and federal legislators. And then we also collaborate with other organizations to try to advance housing needs as part of that. And as I get chances, I'll try to kind of drop some information into the chat when I can in doing that. So that's kind of a lot as far as our program based work. So I'll jump around here a little bit, and then again, want to have just an open discussion, answer questions. We can talk about different activities of ours, but I want to start first by referencing that we have issued a number of reports here in the last 2 years. We've been trying to build awareness about housing struggles or housing barriers, particularly for those who may not be experiencing housing barriers, to help them in joining the fight to help people who are experiencing those barriers. And as part of that, then we have, uh, and if I don't know if you want me to share my screen, but if you do, if somebody could turn the screen sharing option on, that would be great for me to be allowed to do that. But we've issued some different reports. Just today, we issued a report on rising foreclosure rates. Marion County foreclosure rates have been ticking up since the end of the pandemic. Rates had been falling pre-pandemic, but now those rates are going back up again. And given the challenges that individuals have to even become home buyers in today's market. We do not want anybody to lose their housing, particularly if they are a homeowner right now and have an opportunity to build equity and generational wealth. So today we released a report trying to draw attention to issues around those disparities and those problems so that, oh, there we go. Thank you very much. The screen works. Let me try to pop bring this up for you. So this report we released today, and I just want to get to one graphic here and show you, and I'll provide you a link in the report certainly as well. Apologies that I didn't have it quite pulled up and ready here. But here we see the chart, one of the charts in our report that show previous to the pandemic, you had seen that foreclosure rates were falling as we continue to kind of get past uh, the forec the foreclosure crisis and the recession. And then during the pandemic, they really bottomed out because there were a number of programs helping people stay in their homes. Those programs have all since ended due to lack of funding. And the result is we're starting to see these foreclosures go up. We foreclosure data is hard to get. You actually have to purchase it. It's very difficult to just try to make sense of it in the court based upon public data because there's a lot of repetition in multiple filings that you have to go through and clean up. So we purchased some data and then analyzed that. So the data we had was through July. And as of July, there had already been 958 filings, which we expect that there be a lesser number of foreclosures kind of into the winter months here. But there is no way that there's going to be a drop in foreclosures that would make it to where we would be back to pre-pandemic numbers. This is going to be highest. It's going to keep going up, and that's a concern for us. Something else in the report that we released is we talk about the impact on health of foreclosure. We talk about a number of different things. But one of the other things we did was we looked at, and this is of interest to Kepru, given where your office is we looked at neighborhoods who had the highest foreclosure filing rates and then neighborhoods that had the lowest foreclosure filing rates. And you can see Crown Hill had 109 filings, basically from 2018 to 2024. Within that, Far East Side, Meadows, Martindale, Brightwood, all historically Black African American neighborhoods in our city, as well as a number of others. Mapleton Fall Creek, also near kind of the Kepru area. I don't know if Kepru counts itself as being in Butler, Tarkington, or Mapleton Fall Creek or Crown Hill. You're kind of at the nexus, of all those neighborhoods that are there. But we see that our concern with these numbers. And one of the reasons why we have a significant concern about rising foreclosure rates is because these are affordable neighborhoods, and these are likely to be neighborhoods to have an out-of-state investor come in, purchase that home, flip it to an expensive rental, and take it away. So not only does that family get foreclosed upon, but the neighborhood loses an owner-occupied home because it will be flipped to an expensive rental. So there's not a home buying opportunity. And then we looked at the neighborhoods that had the lowest foreclosure rates, and you can see that they're heavily affluent, majority white neighborhoods, where we see just very few such filings that are there. One other thing that I'll reference, we did some mapping here as well. Again, I don't want to spend a ton of time on this because there's other things to talk about, but we also looked at the biggest foreclosing lenders, who are doing the foreclosing in Marion County. We looked at the 2 years since the pandemic. And then you can see US Bank Far Away is the most common. And then the last thing I'll just end with is that in the report, we have appendices here at the back. where you can see breakouts by county when it came to who had received homeowner assistance during the pandemic. And then we also have as well the full chart of neighborhoods filings per 1,000 owner occupied homes, that you have the full list of Indianapolis neighborhoods that you can look at as well. And then we also put in there also some additional lending information as well that is there. I also just want to highlight for you that here on our reports page is a number of reports that we have issued here in recent years. Report on land contracts that we released in the summer, highlighting the impact of housing and environmental justice that we released in June. We had the impact on manufactured housing residents. We're starting to do an annual mortgage lending report as well. So a number of other reports that we have released. I also want to highlight for you our data page. This is something that we launched last year, where, for instance, you can go to this page into the demographics and you can choose a county. So let's say Marion here. We choose Marion. And then let's choose it just for 2022 data, which is the most current updated census data. And it will give you a bunch of charts and graphs about household income breakouts, occupancy, home value, home ownership rates broken out by race and ethnicity. And on all these, you can actually download these graphs to use in your reports or to use for your own personal information. There's 20 different counties here for you to choose from. And then with this also is because we have really tried to raise awareness about mortgage barriers, is we also have this where you can download the most recent data that's available here is 2023. And then for instance, you could choose 2023. Again, you could look at Marion County that is here. Get this, Marion County. And then this gives you then a chart for the top. It's set for the top 70 lenders, but you could download this to Excel, for instance, and then it will then give you then an Excel spreadsheet. You could also look at it on the screen, but it gets a little come to the screen where you can see breakouts of mortgage originations then by Black, white, Hispanic, Asian, different shares, and evaluate those lenders on how that they are doing on that. And then we also have that for applications as well as denial rates. And then a page where you can look up just one specific lender, for instance. If you only wanted to just look up one lender, so let's say BMO Harris, for instance, and you could look them up and it would give you information just on that particular lender. Again, you could do it by just 2023. And then just looking at this for just Marion County, for instance. I might not have gotten Marion, yep. And then it's actually just on your screen where you can get even more information about who are they denying, how many African Americans were being denied, how many originated, average loan rates, all that sort of stuff that's there. The last couple things I want to share just before I open it up then for our questions here today is also that recently we filed 2 class action lawsuits. These were filed, some of you may know him, Marcus Williams. He is our client on these cases where we have alleged that these are class actions. So if other individuals have had similar experiences, we want to interview them. We want to talk with them. The 2 cases have been filed against Progress Residential, and the other one is Tricon Residential, where we allege that they have basically blanket bans when it comes to previous justice involvement. And in Marcus's case, he had an expunged record that they can still continue to deny him housing because that record was pulling up in data when it should not, pulling up in tenant screening reports when it in fact should not. And we allege as part of these cases that disproportionately impacts Black men. In the case that we filed against Tricon, we also alleged in this case that their policy related to past eviction filings, that disproportionately impacts Black women as well. Again, these are both national class action cases. If you know anybody who's rented from Tricon or Progress or applied to rent from Tricon or Progress, please send them our way. We want to talk with them to see if they're eligible to be a member of the class. And NBC News did do a story in recent weeks, a national story, talking about that as well. We have a number of other enforcement actions that we have filed. We try to be very transparent. We try to list a number of our cases. In November, we also filed a case against a landlord here in town we have alleged is sexually harassing tenants. We filed that, and we try to keep this updated for people to be able to not only see what it is that we are uncovering and filing, but also what we're trying to get for resolution as well. So you can always go to our enforcement page to learn more. So with that, I will stop talking and turn it back over to Alvin or to the audience or however we want to proceed with Q&A.
Can y'all hear me now? Okay, is it better or is it still low?
It's a little bit better.
A little bit better. Okay, let's all just give it up for Amy and her team who've been putting in the work over the last many years. So I do want to go ahead and start by passing it to my co-facilitator, Khalid, for a question, and then we'll open it up for the audience.
I have a question for everyone, or not everyone, but for Amy. Is that her name? Is that her name?
Yes.
What's been your like hardest thing doing this, or like your hardest part of the journey?
Well, there's a few different things I could say there. One is, of course, um, seeing the discrimination that occurs, how harmful, how hurtful it is. The clients that we work with, they have to go through it, and as part of our enforcement actions, court cases, may drag out for years, and we have just had some amazing clients over the years who have said, I don't want this to happen to anybody else, but they get put through a lot. The unfairness of what they've had to experience, and we're right there with them every step of the way, and that can be hard at times. Um, it's hard on them. It's hard on our team, as well. Something completely different is funding. Of course, every nonprofit is there's so much more we wish we could do that we would love to be doing, and budgets just limit our ability to be able to do that, and it just feels like sometimes all you're doing is writing grants, and trying to find funding to be able to do the work. And we feel that we're very impactful in our work. We've been challenging a number of mortgage lenders, in our community, particularly in the last 4 to 5 years. We've settled a couple cases. We've had some public challenges. We're meeting with some, privately uh, uh, to try to get them to comply before the possibility of moving into some sort of enforcement action that might be there. And that's hard, expensive, time-consuming, type work, but one case, we could impact thousands of people by getting a bank branch in a neighborhood, getting, loan subsidies for individuals to be able access to become homeowners. So we feel we can always show really strong impact, but things can drag on for a while, and it can be a tough road. It's not fun in the courts. It's a struggle, nowadays. But we have some amazing clients, but then we also do systemic based work as well that can be a struggle.
Question, Khalid. We'll pass to Stephanie and then go for it.
Well, Kyle, that was a great question, man. Appreciate it. I guess my question is maybe one story, a success story that you would like to share with this audience.
Yeah, I kind of already teased our lending work, some of the systemic work that we have been doing, where I really do think the lowest performing lenders, either we're meeting with them to try to get them to do better and they know that we are holding them accountable, or we've entered into some kind of a court-based agreement that requires them, to do better. So we're, very proud of that type of work. But we've also had a number of client-based cases that maybe impacted just, you know, one client or one particular housing development. We had a case that we resolved a couple years ago over in Pike Township with a wonderful client, African American woman there, who was being harassed by her white neighbor in a housing development there, and had to endure that for years. The white neighbor was also targeting Hispanic and Latino in the community as well. And by us kind of stepping in and helping with that, not only did we get that stop, but we also had some really good court wins in getting some rulings on the issue, because the issue on neighbor harassment is still a little tenuous in the courts at the federal level. And we were able to get a really good ruling that other fair housing groups in other parts of the country have been able to use in their neighbor on neighborhood cases. So we've had a few of those over the years where we've gotten some really good court rulings. And it doesn't happen enough, but when it happens, you know, we can see then that we're also having a national impact. And we're particularly, you know, proud of that. Not only helping our clients in that, we truly feel that had we not been there, she wouldn't have been able to, just heavily burdensome for her to navigate that on her own. So that's a client-based story. We have you know, several of those I could talk about. And then systemically, probably our lending work.
Thank you.
Thank you, Amy. And is this better now? We're just trying to turn the mic up a little bit. Can you hear us any better?
The volume's okay, but it's not very clear.
Yeah, the real distorted.
How about now? Is it any better?
Oh,
No?
not
I
really.
think it's okay. I think we can make it out, and maybe I can just repeat the question if I can make sense of it.
Okay, sounds good. So I was just going to ask, since you all started, I think it was, I don't know, 13, 14 years ago or so, have you seen a a difference in having an institution like yours who is creating that accountability and transparency, and what kind of impact that has had on the environment or ecosystem and the actors? And do you feel like
Yeah,
this
and I
is a
think that
strategy?
I think that question came through really clear there, Alvin. So we just into this year is our 13th year, so we haven't been around that long. I was brought in to start up a fair housing organization here in Indiana because Indiana did not have one. Despite the states around us, some of them having organizations that are 40 and 50 years old, and sometimes even more. So I was brought in. So there's, you know, still things obviously that we're working on related to that, but I think on the rental side, it's a bit frustrating because there's so many units. You know, there's so many properties and development that sometimes it can feel like you just aren't really making much of a difference because it's one by one. You know, one particular property very often at a time. Sometimes you can make kind of a broader case against owners or property management, but very often it ends up being kind of one property at a time. And just you're helping that property, but you're not really maybe sometimes impacting hundreds of thousands of units. There's an opportunity for us to do that in these class actions we have filed, because Progress, for instance, has I think it's around 90,000 single family homes. And Tricon has over 40,000 single family homes. So we're talking very, very large companies that have these policies that are nationwide. So we could really show potentially impact there. Again, I come back to I keep talking about the banks, but I really do think that our work here on holding lenders accountable, that, you know, we do have people meet with us. They may not agree with us, but they'll hear us out, hear where our concerns are. Whether or not they change on their own is another story. But I think that many of the low performers, particularly as it relates to Blacks and African Americans, in reaching Blacks and African Americans in our community, that we are dealing with. Either we have in some sort of agreement, we're meeting with them, um, and but there needs to be continued vigilance. We're looking at trying to do some work in Fort Wayne, actually, just because we have found just some glaring problems in mortgage lending in Fort Wayne, for instance. So you might see some of that come out next year when we start kind of raising some awareness about the inequities and disparities in Fort Wayne, where some lenders are doing hundreds of originations and none are to Blacks or African Americans there.
Hey, Amy, this is Khalil. Quick question. Let's say money, resources, dollar weren't an issue. If you were making a decision, a couple recommendations, and it wasn't tied to any challenges, what do you think would be? I don't want to say a panacea, but what do you see systemically that would really alter and change? I just listened to the conversation. I mean, housing discrimination and equity in housing is just, I mean,
Yeah.
decades, generations of same conversation around that. I'm just curious if you could, there's a fix all, what do you see it as? Thanks.
Yeah. There's a few different things. One is I would love to get a fair housing organization started up and running in the north and one in the south. I think that would benefit our state dramatically if we had a couple more groups. I don't think it'd be healthy for us to have satellite offices. I think it's better for us, like the states around us, have other groups where we could come together, work together on issues. We've been doing a lot of work trying to challenge out-of-state investors who've been buying up our single-family homes, particularly in our neighborhoods of color. I kind of had mentioned that a little bit earlier. We had released a report back in 2023 that got a lot of national press, has gotten a lot of awareness. And then in January, we'll be releasing a follow-up report showing broader problems. If I could stop out-of-state investors from buying any more single-family homes, that would be something. So we can kind of stop the bleeding, so to speak, because there's not enough homes being built to make up for all that are being bought that are owner occupied and flipped into expensive rentals. They're doing it too fast and too easy. We've also started talking about homeowners insurance. We have some really significant concerns here in Indiana that people are getting kicked off homeowners insurance, claims aren't being met, and that could really impact, again, low to moderate income families who own their homes and have a mortgage and have to have homeowners insurance. And of course, we want everybody to have that coverage, but prices are escalating so high. It's something we mentioned in our foreclosure report that we have worries that people are being driven into foreclosure or have to sell their home because they can't pay homeowners insurance rates anymore. That's an escalating problem that is going to take a lot to tackle. And finally, I really wish the Indiana General Assembly would um, be more fair when it came to consumer-based protections. It is a General Assembly that is heavily influenced by the housing industry groups, to the point that it's all or nothing kind of with them. And I wish that there was, if I could impact that, I would want there to be much more balance, maybe swing to the consumer side for a while because the industry has had their way for so many years, and then eventually settle into something that's a bit more balanced. But it's so lopsided there that it's a real struggle to really protect our housing consumers, both renters and homeowners and home buyers, given just how the industry is able to pretty much do whatever they want.
Excellent answer. Thank you.
I have a quick question. Are there any organizations so I was raised in Northwest Indiana, um, in Munster, so very much I was raised in also the part of Munster that was a bit closer to lower income houses, but also kind of sandwiched in between. So um definitely saw the full gamut of prosperity and wealth at the expense of others in housing have troubles. I guess my question is, are there any organizations or springboards that you see for Northern Indiana that could help get a fair housing center started up here?
So I think, I get calls every once in a while from some groups uh, in that area. South Bend I've had some groups in South Bend reach out to me as well. The problem is that it's probably going to need to be a group like ours or a national fair housing type organization to be a mentor. So you
Yeah.
got to find the money to be able to, you got to write a grant to get the money, and then you need the mentor. And that can be a struggle, and we don't have time to do our own work, as it is right now. So I've always said, hey, if you write the grant and you get the money, we'll figure some way to mentor you, but
Yeah,
we just can't do it all for you. We
of course.
need to have you do that piece to show that there's buy-in there. Um, you know, at times there was they changed their name. It was the Northwest Reinvestment Coalition or something like that that was up there.
Mhm.
That they one time have, talked different times
Yeah.
about something up there. There's a foundation in South Bend that I'm blanking on right now that has reached out a couple different times, also wanting to
Yeah.
talk about trying to get something, set up there. And again, I'm always like, hey, write the grant. We'll
Yeah.
happy to talk about it, until then, but we're not gonna write the grant and everything, with it too. So
Makes sense. Yeah, I know.
there was a time,
Mhm.
sorry, there was a time when Louisville had a fair housing organization and kind of did some of the counties in southern Indiana. But
Yeah.
during the Bush administration, W administration, they did close because it was kind of hard out there for fair housing groups in those years. And so now just the Lexington group is there trying to cover, they're like us trying to cover all of Kentucky, where for a while, they had a couple groups at least down there.
That's
So
yeah, that's what I was kind of thinking too, is just a lot of, especially where I'm at, and I know obviously there's South Bend, there's other northern Indiana counties and metropolitan areas, but I know the vast majority of people in northern Indiana are in northwest Indiana. And I know that like Chicago does have a lot of organizations or agencies that kind of go over the state line a bit. But okay, thank you for your answer though. I appreciate that.
yeah, there's a group called South Suburban Housing Center, which is in
Yeah.
on the Illinois side. They do kind of try to help out a little bit in Lake County
Yes.
over
Okay.
there, a little bit, and we do referrals from people calling specific. But I think Lake County is the only county
Oh,
that they kind of, and they got their hands full, as it is over there. But they will try to help out a little bit in Lake at least.
okay. Makes sense. Thank
Yeah, thanks, Ruth. We'll pass it back to Stephanie and Em. And again, if anyone has questions, feel free to raise your hand, and in the room too. Feel free to raise your hand. I'll pass the mic over.
Well, I guess I'd like to ask, we got a couple of foundation folks in the room, Matt and Jeff, if you guys have any information you might want to chime in on this particular piece of the question, the landscape, et cetera, welcome hearing what you guys would add to the conversation.
I think we are in the process of rolling out a strategic plan at CICF that will be more regionally focused beyond just the Hamilton County and Marion County geographies that we've served since our beginning in the late 90s. And with the goal being to try to rally. Well, first of all, I think build some awareness of issues that transcend county lines in central Indiana, and then build a coalition that over time could begin to influence policy decisions at the county level and at the state level. It's been somewhat validating and reassuring just in the work that we've done over the past year that counties that you might not think about or you might not consider that they're thinking about affordable housing, attainable housing, workforce housing, but they really are. And those who are trying to move the needle need support and need an organization or multiple organizations that can help them bridge gaps in communication and language and financing at the local level, and then help assemble like-minded people to influence leaders at the State House. It's going to be a long haul, and I think we are not naive about the time that this will take, but we feel like CICF specifically is perhaps uniquely suited to build some of those relationships, and educate folks who might not otherwise be aware of what's going on and what could go on in their communities of housing was more abundant and attainable.
Good to see you. Glad you could join. I did want to ask, and then we'll go to Matt real quick. Being a nerd for this and having worked on this for a lot of years, how would you answer the same question that Khalil asked Amy? If you had a couple buckets, you said, "Hey, these are my couple buckets. If we had the resources or the power to do it, this is where I would focus."
Well, I mean, I think if we were talking about like sources of funds, I would focus on first on preservation of existing affordability, um, and then second on building sneaky density in areas where there are land acquisition opportunities or land that's already under public control. Um, Rodney Stockman from the city, and I've been noodling on some ideas around developing land that's not in city ownership, but it's in like municipal corporation ownership. And some of that land happens to be really close to the purple line. So identifying land opportunities like that first in Marion County and then I think across the region to try to build, at least duplexes, but could you do townhouses? Could you do, 10-unit apartment buildings, things that were built routinely 100 years ago that we stopped building really after the 1940s in Marion County. And then could you roll that out over or across the region? And then one of the things that um, we would like to do at CICF, and this is kind of piggybacking off the work that Amy's done so well over the years, is could we could we create something like a Central Indiana housing report card that the Boston Foundation has been doing for 20 years in Greater Boston? Could we adapt or adopt something like that here, where every year it gives us an opportunity to bring the issue of housing back to the top of the public's mind, and could we time it around the legislative session, or could we time it in a way that creates opportunities for larger conversations and then perhaps policy changes at the state level?
Hi, Amy. This is Matt in Pink. One of the things I've been paying close attention to is a lot of problems with IHA, the Indianapolis Housing Authority, and in particular, some of the coverage in Mere Indy on landlords who have been evicting tenants because IHA is not paying up what they're supposed to pay. Has that been on the radar for your organization, and is there anything that can be done to help people if they're not being fairly treated by either IHA or their landlords who are supposed to be receiving those vouchers?
Yeah, I wish that that problem was new. It's been around for a while. It's just that it's gotten so much worse with IHA's massive systemic problems just on in every single spot. There's just nothing that it's doing well. So because of that, it's been a struggle. There was, if we look back quite a few years now, back in 2014, the city of Indianapolis actually got very close to providing protection from discrimination for people who use housing choice vouchers in Section 8. It got through. It just had it got a council vote. They had sent it back to committee. There was the votes there. They just wanted to add in an exemption for very small landlords. So it was sent back to committee to get that exemption worked out. And then it was going to go back to the full committee who are going to approve it. And the industry ran to the state house and got that preempted. So it's not only IHA's issues that they've had a number of vouchers that were not filled for so many years. That's been a long-term problem where they've just had, 1,000 vouchers just sitting there that they just didn't get filled. Then you've had that individuals in our state that can be lawfully denied housing just for using a voucher are just massively denied at we had a report several years ago, 80 to 90%, depending upon if it's a white neighborhood or not, um, high levels. And then you add in then IHA not paying landlords timely, which then give landlords the excuse of this is why we don't take voucher holders, even though it's not the voucher holder who's the problem, it's IHA. Um, so this has been a long-term problem. I had hoped by HUD coming in and kind of taking over that we would see results faster, but it shows that that system was just so broke and people are suffering as a result, and it's got to get fixed. I mean, there's just no way around it. But I do worry um, how it will get fixed in that, particularly when we have a different administration coming in now who is likely not to be friendly to public housing residents or Section 8 voucher holders who may look to privatize that, which will not, I don't think, go very well. I can't imagine how it could get worse, but the possibility is there that it could.
Amy, for the average person out there who just wants to figure out a way to contribute, any suggestions of ways to get involved, especially coming into this new administration, this new year, this new legislative cycle? Any suggestions of ways that we can be involved in something making a positive change?
Yeah. So I mean, it depends upon what interests you, but there's groups like I highly encourage the Hoosier Housing Needs Coalition. That is a group that we are on a steering committee of that's made up of a number of organizations working on housing issues inside the Indiana State House. It also has individual members, as well, where there are blasts out during session on meeting with legislators or contacting your legislators or what's going on. We have an email blast that we send out too, but really try to leverage power and impact through that coalition. So that's a great resource for you if you're interested in the Indiana State House, which is primarily where the Hoosier Housing Needs Coalition work, and they primarily work on rental-based issues as well. So that's a good group to get involved with, to follow. They're on social media. Follow them. Thanks, Stephanie, dropping that in. And they also, too, is if you want to help fight housing discrimination, we are always in need of fair housing testers, people who participate as part of our secret shopper program to help us uncover housing discrimination. We need people of all colors, races, ages, with and without disabilities, where you basically are, a secret shopper. You're there like a restaurant critic to just write down afterwards what your experience was. And we do pay stipends for that type of work. So that there's always an opportunity to get involved, in something like that. Something as simple as even just, sharing information on social media. I know there's some eviction court watchers here. That's been a great program. Judges notice when those eviction court watches are there. They can have an impact just by being in the room. Trying to get that, if you can share that with your religious groups, with professional organizations outside of Indianapolis, so we can get that going in other cities as well. That would certainly be beneficial. And last thing I will say is so many people, and it's okay, do not know who their state rep is or their state senator is. Find that out, be ready to make those calls, to send those emails, because during session, when things are moving so fast, we so often hear, well, no, none of my constituents are contacting me about this. And we're like, really? But you really can have an impact with your state rep or state senator during session, particularly if you're outside of the Indianapolis area, because the Indianapolis ones tend to be fairly friendly to the cause. So if you have family members, again, groups that work with, if your church has a church in, an affiliate church in another city, if you can get them involved, you could really have an impact.
And Ruth, we'll go to you, but first I want to open it up for anyone who hasn't got a chance to ask a question yet.
Yeah, this is Scott. I'll jump in. It's sort of building on the legislative influence issue. I've been doing volunteer work in Marion County for a long time, but it happens that I live in Hamilton County. And I figured out in the last couple of years who my representatives are. I didn't know that 5 years ago, but I know who they are these days. One question I had was, is there a way to, whether it be your data, Amy, or other housing related data, to divide that up according to legislative area or the district? Because it goes across counties, and I noticed the sort by county, but the legislature's not divided by county. It's divided by mixes of counties and things like that. It seems like that if I could hand the data to the legislator, here's exactly what the data are for your district, that might have some impact. Is there a way to do that, or is that a fair statement that would be an effective way to do that?
Yeah, so our data portal, we tried to fill where there are gaps. So predict the demographics, or some different places where you can get some demographic information, but we really wanted to get the lending information, mortgage lending, because nobody else was really getting that data out there. The state has, there's an eviction website that I'm sure you know of. There's some other, the state has a housing platform page that has some kind of data kind of on that. So ours is very specific. We actually talked about the legislative district issue when we were setting up our portal, and it's still on our list. The problem, of course, is money. We only had so much money to get the portal set up, and we could not afford to do every county in the state, which is why we started with the 20 most populous counties in doing that. But it was definitely something we talked about. It is completely possible for us to do it in our portal. We just need some funding, and we ran out of funds to be able to do it, to be honest.
Amy,
We had to stop at 20 counties.
I think that the Prosperity Indiana website has housing data broken up by legislative districts. And so Scott, you may be able to go on there and pull down to the district level in Hamilton County some pretty powerful information on gaps in it's sort of housing needs and gaps in the supply across the state.
I actually started with Prosperity Indiana with this question a couple of days ago, and they referred me elsewhere. And then the second party referred me back to Prosperity
Yeah,
Indiana.
well, I'll do a little quick check while we're on this meeting and see if I can put something in the chat. Because I literally was just looking at the data earlier this week, and maybe I'm just getting the location of it incorrect. So hold please, and I'll be back.
And you could be right, Jeff. And I should know this because I work with Prosperity Indiana so much. They do have the housing affordability one by county, and they could have something by legislative district, and I'm just blanking on it. But they have the housing affordability issue.
I'll do a quick search of my own Google history, and I'll be right back.
Thank you.
But getting back to on the mortgage lending side, it is on our list for someday. When we are able to, we've got to get all the counties in, and then we can start dividing up by legislative district. But we need to have all the counties in first, and we're just not there yet.
Yeah, and real quick for a time check, Amy, I know we had said to try and limit it to an hour.
We can't hear you.
How about now? Is it any better?
That's a bit better. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ruth. So I know we had said we were going to try and keep it in an hour. Are you good if we take 10 more minutes to just answer any other questions we got? Okay, thank you, Amy. Appreciate it. So I just want to go to make a space for one more person who hasn't got a chance to ask questions yet first, and then we'll go to Ruth.
I have a question. Amy, you were mentioning secret home buyers and court observers. Can you go over that just a little bit more? If someone were interested, how would they get involved? What would that process look like?
So two different programs. The one that's through our organization is the Fair Housing Testing or the Secret Shopper program, goes by both names. And I dropped a link to that into the chat where you can learn more. You shoot us an email, we'll send you an application, assuming that you don't have any conflicts in being able to do it. The court watching program, a lot of that is being done through some church groups. I know Rabbi Aaron was supposed to be here tonight and unfortunately wasn't able to be here. His group has been trying to help with that and has a number of churches that are doing that. Scott, you do court watching program, so you might, right? You might be able to also, say how does somebody actually get connected with that? But that's separate. We don't run that particular program. We run the Secret Shopper program.
Thank you, Tina. Okay, we'll go to Ruth now.
Hello, real quick, because earlier I was Googling, so I'm putting the eviction court watch training in there. They're actually their most recent training, I guess, was today via Zoom. Rats. And you can't sign up for the next one, but they're the third Wednesday of each month, I learned. So Tina, that's a little a tidbit for you, I guess. I think my question is that I have noticed a bit in the different types of social justice organizations that I've been a part of or volunteered with in the Indianapolis area and Indiana in general, that there are a lot of people, it seems, wanting like fair housing legislation and working towards the things that you're working towards. And I guess my question is, when it comes to legislation, and especially in that policy space, how is Fair Housing Center, how are you working together with groups, or kind of sending out the bat signal, right? And being like, okay, we are going to the courthouse on this day, or what does that look like for y'all? Part one. And then part two, the question is, how could that be better? And what would help make it better?
Yeah. So there's been a couple I guess couple comments that I'll start there. One is that when we first got up and running and we were going to the State House, there was only 2 or 3 groups that were there talking about consumer-based housing issues. The industry groups have always been there. So I have seen massive growth in that area, particularly since the COVID pandemic, and a lot more groups coming together to advocate together on housing issues. We need a lot more still, particularly groups outside of central Indiana. But there has been massive improvement. It's not enough to beat the industry when they want something, but it is getting better. So that's been an improvement. During session, Hoosier Housing Needs, we support them. Like I said, they tend to focus more on rental issues, which we support on that. And we've tried to then, for our work, be more on the home buyer side. Again, raising awareness of this, out-of-state investor purchases. As I mentioned, we're starting to do some work on homeowners insurance that might come up in this session, as well. Issues around property taxes, different things related to that. So we do weekly, usually get it out on Friday. Sometimes it goes out on Saturday or Sunday, depending upon how busy the week was. During the session, I do a weekly email that does a wrap up. It focuses pretty much almost always, except for a couple of things here and there that pop up, on the bills that we are most interested in. What's going on, that sort of thing with it. Where we have calls of action, this is where we need you to step up. We also alert people to rally days as part of that. There will be a couple different housing-based rallies this year, which there have been, and each year those have gotten increasingly bigger, as well. So the improvement is there. It's slow. It's been slow, and the industry, to the detriment, has a lot of money that they can throw around that the social justice groups simply do not. And unfortunately, money can influence votes. So that's why we need to have a lot of people calling and showing up to be able to counteract the money that is going, into votes. And it's unlikely that my organization will ever have a PAC, but every industry group has a PAC in the state, and they use it very, very much in throwing hundreds of thousands of dollars around.
Well, thank you for letting me know. That was insightful. I'm glad that the consumer presence is growing, and also not surprised, unfortunately, that it's not quite enough. But thank you for the answer.
Thank you, Ruth. Thank you, Amy. Any other questions? So we're going to open it up maybe for a final question or things people want to share. Even be a reflection or takeaway.
No, I just want to nudge a little on that last statement, Amy, around not having a PAC. Is that more of a, you said never, would that be more of from a resource a position, or a more moral ethical positioning around not having a PAC?
No, I would happily throw money around if we could. It is more, having the amount of money that is needed to have that kind of influence. When we have so many other more pressing needs for our dollars, being able to do our work, we really need a very generous donor to come along and help set something like that up for us.
I have another question. I'm curious what your thoughts are about what we should anticipate with the new political environment at the federal level.
Chaos. I've my staff, I've had a few meetings with my staff now. I have a staff that is different races and ethnicities, different religions, LGBTQ. And I've said, January 20th is going to be rough. This is being recorded. I need to state that we are a 501c3 organization. We do not endorse candidates, but we can talk about policy-based issues. And we do anticipate on January 20th that there are going to be a lot of executive orders that are targeting the people we care most about. Our own employees will feel targeted. With that, we're anticipating just a lot of rollbacks. If Project 2025 is to be believed, special purpose credit programs, which was a way for lenders to try to reach particularly people of color with mortgage products, those will be rolled back. Affirmatively furthering fair housing, disparate impact regulations will be rolled back. LGBTQ, under the Biden administration, the federal policy was if somebody was discriminated against due to sexual orientation and gender identity, that was protected under the gender definition. That's not defined within the act. That very well could get rolled back. We're going to see, it talks about, cuts to the Housing Choice Section 8 program, a zeroing out of Housing First for homeless. And there's going to be, we count on Department of Justice for a lot of redlining cases, challenging lenders that we can't get to. And under the previous Trump administration, we just didn't see those cases, and it's unlikely those cases are going to be filed. And then I worry about just the impact to federal agencies, staffs there. That's going to take a long time to recover from, even if something changes. That it's not going to be just a light switch being flipped back on and they go back to what they were doing. You're going to be dealing with a number of employee losses, either if they're terminated or if they leave, on their own, that it's going to be hard for those departments to do their work. And that's assuming, that work is being given to them on doing it. But it is going to be, it's likely, it appears as likely. We're worried, of course, about fair housing funding being zeroed out. So because we do get some federal grants, we haven't had great success with the local private foundations here. Jeff's a great guy, but we got turned down by CICF last week, for a grant, or the Indianapolis Foundation for a grant last week. So we really end up being reliant upon federal funding. We haven't been able to get the private foundations to support us. So And we're not alone. There's going to be cuts like that across so many different programs, and it's going to be a challenge.
Thank you, Amy. So I do want to just take a second for everyone to come off mute and let's just make some noise for Amy. And thank you for sharing all your insight.
Thanks for sharing, Amy. Appreciate you. Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you, Amy.
Great work.
I'll also
Thank you
ask
for the
Amy to
invite.
drop a link to make a donation to the Fair Housing Center. If you want to see this work continue, please support the Fair Housing Center. And I'll also do a shout out also for KEPRA, that we are, in order to keep the lights on and continue these community conversation, we also rely on support from folks like you. So we are currently in our annual campaign. Naz, if we could drop the donate.kepra.org in the chat, and also support Amy's organization as well. So if you could put that link in the chat too, we'd love to support.
Thank you, Amy.
Yeah, and we'll leave the Zoom room open for a little bit just so that you can grab the links if you need them. And thanks everyone for coming out tonight. Again, it was a great conversation. And like you said, much work to do for everybody.
Thank y'all.
Also,
Thank
shout
you.
out to the tech crew, Naz and Jayru, who
Hey,
really
hey, don't leave Colin out.
and
I should
Paolo.
mention we also have a shop page. You can get sweatshirts, t-shirts on a donation basis, whatever's meaningful to you. We'll send things out for free as well if you can't afford it. But you can get a housing-based sweatshirt that talks about safe, affordable, accessible, discrimination-free housing for all. Tote bags.
Really
So I
nice.
dropped the shop page link as well.
Swag. Get your swag tonight.
Cool.
Holiday gifts.
Love it.
Colin, great work, man.
Good evening and new year. We will see you maybe next week, maybe in the new year.